Under the hazy moonlight, James carried Diep back to the wooden house after she discovered that he had faked illness to counter John. Their smiles merged with the sounds of the night wind, reinforcing their unbreakable love, as they learned that every conspiracy had been foiled by the hidden camera. In episode 42, it will be revealed that Diep comes under threat when John's plan for revenge fails. Can James protect her from the enemy's final counterattacks, as their love faces a new challenge, born from jealousy and hatred? At dawn in a small roadside cafe, lytutien sat on an old wooden chair, the pale sunlight filtering through the corrugated metal roof, casting light on his worn face. His sharp eyes skimmed through a file of documents spread on the table, his pen taking notes of every small line written on paper. The cafe was quiet. Only the gentle wind rustled through the distant eucalyptus trees, and the sound of water being poured from the aluminium kettle of the owner mingled with the aroma of freshly roasted coffee. Ha wore a neat black suit, his tall, slender figure exuding the calm demeanor of a seasoned man. Yet a hint of tension crept into his mind as he thought, James's lawsuit is complicated, and John is no ordinary foe. I must prepare thoroughly. Suddenly a tall figure entered. John, with his long black coat and icy gaze, approached and said in a deep, cutting voice, "Hello, are you Lawyer Ha?" Ha looked up calmly. "Yes, that's me. What can I do for you?" John sat down opposite him, his eyes as sharp as knives. "Did you take on the lawsuit for that CI company of James?" Ha nodded. "Yes, I did. Why do you ask?" John gave a cold laugh, his voice laced with insinuation. "How much is he paying you?" Ha replied evenly, "That's between me and my client. I can't disclose that." John pushed a bag of paper money across the table, his eyes frosty. "I'll pay you 5 times that. 1 billion VND with one condition. Make sure James loses the case. In this bag, there's 500 million VND up front. The rest will follow after the job's done." Ha looked at the money, his eyes wavering slightly, but his voice remained firm. "I'm sorry, I already agreed with James. I cannot betray my client." Leaning forward threateningly, John said, "I know betrayal isn't good, but 5 times the money. Think about it carefully." Then, leaving a bank card on the table for Lawyer Ha, John departed. A few kilometers away, in a forest, Diep walked along a dirt trail covered with dry leaves. Her worn rubber slippers whispered on the ground as she ventured deep into the woods. The brittle, dry yellow leaves crunched under her feet, blending with the soft wind blowing through the tall trees, and carrying the early spring's chill through the thick branches. The weak light filtering through the canopy cast a blurred glow on her thin face, accentuating her clear eyes which, despite a trace of weariness, sparkled with joy as she clutched a small knife to cut bananas. The dull blade sliced through the tough peel, and her hands, stained with red earth, gripped the handle tightly. She wore a patchwork thin shirt with holes that let the cold seep through, sending shivers down her arms and raising goosebumps with every gust of wind. Yet inside, her heart burned like a small, steady flame as she recalled. "Yesterday, James carried me home and smiled with me under the moonlight. I was so happy. Today, I'm cutting the ripe bananas so that he can have some, for he loves bananas so much." She bent down to pick a cluster of green bananas hanging loosely from a low branch. Her fingers brushed over the smooth peel as she murmured with pride, "This bunch is beautiful. It'll surely be sweet when ripe." Another cluster lay scattered on the ground, its bananas rotten under a layer of dry leaves. She sighed, her voice tinged with regret. "They're all ruined. What a pity. The wind last night must have been too strong." Methodically, she cut the bananas, her actions steady and careful, her determination as relentless as the blowing wind. "I must work hard so that he can be at ease. He's burdened by the company's troubles, and I don't want to add to his load." As she gathered the cut bananas into a basket, her eyes swept over the quiet forest, and she wondered, has he managed to defeat John yet? I must help him, even if just a little. Not far from there, along a forest road, James and his younger brother Hung parked the sleek black Ford Raptor by the roadside. Dust from the unpaved path left dry streaks on the tires as they stood chatting under the canopy of tall eucalyptus trees. The wind stirred the dry leaves into a thin, faded golden carpet on the ground. James, clad in a dust-smeared grey jacket from his days working on the farm, looked at his brother with calm resolve as his deep voice carried over the gentle breeze. "Hung, I've been waiting for you. Were you not coming? Why didn't you call first?" Hung, tall in a crisp white shirt, with his hands in his pockets, responded seriously. "Brother, I just spread the news as you requested, that you're gravely ill, just as you said, across all branches. What's the situation with John? I'm worried he won't stop." James nodded, his eyes glinting with a hint of cunning as he thought about the hidden camera footage, his deep voice confident. I have video evidence of him confessing to bribery, pulling out funds, and inciting the workers, but it's not enough to completely end him. I need to confront him one more time, force him to either stop or bring ruin upon himself. What do you think? Hung furrowed his brow, his gaze betraying uncertainty, and in a heavy tone said, I think we shouldn't send him to prison immediately. If our family truly wronged him 35 years ago as he claims, we should negotiate first, give him a chance to make amends. But if he persists, then we'll use the evidence to bring him to justice. James nodded in agreement, his eyes lighting up with resolve. Exactly. I don't want the common folk to suffer further because of his vendetta. They've endured enough. Hung placed a steady hand on his brother's shoulder and said firmly, do what you must, but be cautious. John is dangerous. James smiled gently, a warm feeling blossoming in his heart. Hung understands, and so does Diep. I must protect them. At a small roadside cafe in Tanmin town, John sat on a faded blue plastic chair. His gaze was as cold as ice as he glanced at the steaming cup of tea on the worn wooden table. The steam rose lazily in the chilly morning air of early spring, and the weak sunlight filtering through the rusty tin roof accentuated the angular features of his face, highlighting the rigid lines that hinted at hidden meanings. The quiet cafe was punctuated only by the soft rustle of the eucalyptus trees outside, carrying a trace of red earth from the nearby trail, mingled with the hushed conversations of a few distant patrons and the faint scent of green tea. Yet, inside, John's heart burned with simmering rage as he thought. I refuse to take my money. The stubborn fool. I must bring James down by other means. This time, I cannot let him win. He sipped his tea, the bitter taste sliding down his throat, his dark eyes envisioning James's downfall, as he murmured to himself, so what if he has the video? I'll find a way to turn the tables. Unexpectedly, James stepped into the cafe, the weak light from the door casting a glow on his face, which now shone with steady determination despite the hardships. He wore his dust-stained grey coat, and his deep voice rang out amid the silence, slicing through the ambient noise of the wind. John, I didn't expect you to be so shameless. This is the video of you confessing to bribing the lawyer, pulling out funds, inciting a workers' riot, and being the Thai smuggling kingpin. Stop it now. Raising his phone, James played the video, John's voice echoing clearly in the recording. John let out a cold laugh, his lips curling with scorn. You think you've won? I'll bring you down. I haven't even begun to show you what I'm capable of. James's eyes turned steely as he replied evenly, think carefully. If you stop now, I'll delete the video. If not, you're headed for prison. The evidence is enough to take you to court. John stood up abruptly. The plastic chair creaked under his weight as his eyes darkened like a stormy sky, and in a threatening tone he said, I'll relent this time, but it's far from over. You wait and see. With that, he turned and left the cafe, his tall figure gradually disappearing into the pale light while he seethed silently. He may win this round, but I'll be back, and James will pay the price. James then sat down on the chair John had vacated, his eyes deep in thought as he vowed to himself, he may have failed today, but the danger is far from over. I must protect Diep. Not far away, at the small wooden house of Diep's mother in Tanmin village, Diep entered through the creaking wooden door. Her worn rubber slippers squeaked on the earthen floor as her eyes brightened at the sight of her mother, Mrs. Lan, sitting on an old faded wooden chair. The frail figure in a worn brown blouse, her wrinkled hands resting on her lap, was bathed in the light streaming through the window, which highlighted the deep creases on her face, yet showed eyes still brimming with love. Diep approached with a voice as cheerful as birdsong in a forest. Mother, I'm here. How are you? Mrs. Lan looked up and smiled gently, her cracked lips parting in a warm greeting. Diep, are you well? I've missed you. It's been too long since you visited. Sitting down beside her, Diep set the basket of freshly cut wild bananas on the floor and said in a voice soft as a spring breeze, I'm fine, Mother. I've gathered some wild bananas for you to share with me. Mrs. Lan nodded, her eyes lighting up with joy as she looked at her daughter, and in a quiet voice said, I'm okay, just a bit tired. How is James doing? Diep's cheeks flushed with a rosy glow as she recalled last night, and she replied brightly, he treats me so well. Yesterday he carried me home, and I was happy all night, dreaming of his smile. Mrs. Lan nodded, a trace of worry flickering in her eyes despite her warmth. That's good, I'm glad, but be careful. I've heard that his company is in trouble. Diep squeezed her mother's hand, a pang of worry in her heart. Mother cares for me so much. I must reassure her. Later, as the sun dipped into a faint dusk, James arrived at Diep's house. His old leather shoes clicked softly along the red dirt path leading to the yard, and he carried a bag of fresh pork he'd just bought at the market. His gentle eyes scanned the small garden where the vibrant green mustard greens swayed in the breeze, and his heart warmed as he thought, "I'll cook soup for her. It's been too long since we shared a meal." Stepping through the swaying wooden door, the light from the oil lamp on the wall illuminated his face, revealing a soft smile as he set the bag on the battered wooden table. He began to prepare dinner. The sound of dry firewood crackling in the modest kitchen, the aroma of country rice mingling with the rising scent of simmering pork, all stirred memories of Diep's smile from the night before. James chopped the pork into bite-sized pieces as the fragrance of the stew began to fill the air, intermingling with the homey scent of rice cooking in the pot. His heart fluttered at the thought of Diep sitting across from him, a smile lighting up under the lamplight. Soon Diep arrived. Her eyes sparkled with joy as she stepped in, her old rubber slippers clicking on the floor. She immediately caught the delicious aroma and with a light voice that cut through the quiet said, "What are you cooking, love? It smells amazing." James turned, a broad smile breaking over his weathered face, and replied in a warm, deep tone, "Pork soup. Perfect timing. Come, sit down and eat with me." Diep set aside the banana basket she had been carrying, and her eyes shone as she looked at him. "You're so talented. Let me help set the table." They sat together at the small wooden table, the soft glow of the oil lamp illuminating both of their smiles. As Diep tasted the soup, her face lit up and she exclaimed happily, "Delicious! I never knew you could cook so well." James laughed, his eyes tenderly looking at her. "With you here, everything tastes better. When you're with me, every dish is perfect." Diep ladled another spoonful of soup into James's bowl and said in a soft voice, "You've been so busy today, haven't you? I see you've lost some weight." James nodded, his eyes showing a hint of fatigue but still warm as he replied, "The company has been in chaos these past few days, but I'm all right now. I just want to spend more time with you." Diep smiled brightly. "I want that too. Last night, when you carried me home, I was so happy. I even dreamed of you." James laughed deeply. "Really? Tell me about your dream." Diep lowered her head, a shy blush on her cheeks. "I dreamed that you cooked soup for me, just like tonight. And you even sang." James grinned, his eyes twinkling. "Sang? One day I'll sing for you, though I warn you, I'm not a great singer." Diep shook her head firmly. "No, I love everything you do." James scooped a spoonful of rice and offered it to her. "Eat up. You're too thin. I worry about you." Diep accepted it warmly. "You eat too. Look, you seem tired. How's the company?" James sighed, his eyes clouded with sorrow. "John has been causing trouble, but I've defeated him. I have the video of him confessing. He was told to stop or else he'd go to prison." Diep's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? You're amazing. I worry about you taking on so much for our sake." James nodded. "It's hard, but for you and the farmers, I must do what I must." "Everything's settled now. Don't worry." Diep squeezed his hand, her voice choked with emotion. "Promise me you won't suffer any longer. I'm here with you." James smiled, his heart warmed. "With you by my side, I can overcome anything." Diep then said, "Today, I visited Mother. She's feeling better now, and she invited me to stay with her." James nodded happily. "That's wonderful. If she's well, I'm relieved. But promise me, you won't be too far away." Diep laughed softly. "I'll be right here with you. Mother understands." James gently tousled her hair. "I'm so lucky to have you, Diep. Let's keep going together, all right?" Diep nodded firmly. "Yes, I trust you." They continued eating, the oil lamp's soft light highlighting their smiles, and their hearts felt as warm as an eternal fire in the hearth. As John's schemes crumbled, and Diep found peace beside James, will their love triumph over yet another challenge? Stay tuned for episode 43, where explosive jealousy and hatred from the past threaten to tear them apart. Find out what happens next.
Có lẽ từ khoảnh khắc đứng trước cô, bảo vệ cô khỏi sự tàn nhẫn của Paul, những ngày khi cảm giác ngọt ngào ấy len lỏi trong vào lòng, nỗi tự ti lại trỗi dậy như một con sóng dữ. Mình là ai mà dám yêu anh ấy? Một người phụ nữ nghèo khổ từng bị chồng bỏ rơi, không cha không mẹ, mình không xứng đáng. Cô tự nhủ, đôi mắt mờ đi vì những giọt nước mắt kìm nén. Diệp bước chân ra, đôi tay gầy guộc ôm lấy mình để xua đi cái lạnh của cơn gió sớm. Cô cúi xuống nhìn Haki, chú chó đang bẫy đuôi bên trong cô, và mỉm cười yếu ớt. Haki, bạn đã đói chưa? Cô hỏi với giọng dịu nhẹ nhàng như nói với một người bạn thân thiết.